EmMajority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
EmMajority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Thursday, May 16th, 2024. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Regina Kunzel, professor at Yale University, author of In the Shadow of Diagnosis, Psychiatric Power and Queer Life. And later in the show, Beshara Doumani, professor of Palestinian Studies at Brown, joins us to talk about the Nakba 76 years later. Also on the program today, as the ICJ hears an emergency request by South Africa to halt the Rafah offensive, Israel's defense minister Gallant publicly breaks with Netanyahu on post-war plans for Gaza. That's the guy the U.S. is quietly backing. Mainstream Senate Democrats begin publicly criticizing Biden's incoherent weapons policy towards Israel. Another Biden staffer has resigned in protest, the first Jewish American to do so. She said, quote, "Biden is making Jews the face of the American war machine." Renowned Israeli historian Ilan Pappy, detained by U.S. authorities in Detroit after a flight, asking him if he supports Hamas. Bleak stuff right now, guys. 5 IDF soldiers were killed by friendly fire in northern Gaza. California State University places its president on leave, or for one of its schools, Sonoma, I believe, because he wanted to agree with the protesters' divestment demands. Bob Menendez's corruption trial has started, and his lawyers are going with the bold strategy of blaming his wife. Are we going to see some marital issues here? I'm unsure. The Slovakian Prime Minister, a Putin and Orban ally, is expected to survive yesterday's assassination attempt. Protesters demand justice in Argentina after 3 lesbian women were set on fire in a hate crime. And rights groups blame Milei for the anti-LGBTQ hatred in the country right now. Biden asserts executive privilege on the recording of that special counsel interview he's so obsessed with, that no one cares about. But emergency press conference time. If you guys remember that weird moment. Trump's lawyers are questioning Michael Cohen today. That'll be fun. Some good news, the Supreme Court has ordered a second majority black district in Louisiana, upholding a January map. And lastly, indigenous-led protests in the French island territory of New Caledonia rage. And France has responded with a crackdown and TikTok ban. Colonialism is alive and well, folks. All this and more on today's Majority Report, or should I say EmMajority Report, as I am working on a trademark. Actually, I'd never do that. I'd never do that.
Marketing.
Pretty anti-intellectual property. I saw Taylor Swift was trying to...
Your rival in this space?
I mean, my peer, Taylor Swift, was trying to trademark the term female rage. I just... It's like the most like white lady capitalism feminist BS personified, this person. I mean, give me a break here.
Trademark things like Hump Day. Gloria Steinem didn't trademark that?
She didn't apply for a trademark.
Betty Friedan didn't trademark female rage.
And what does she have to be rageful about? She's a billionaire. I don't care about your rage.
Her relationships.
I forgot.
Her exes.
The only person who's ever had relationships. Anyway, so that's not the most.
Still not happy about the Super Bowl.
I don't know how I got off on that tangent, by the way. Anyway, we're talking intellectual property. But more important news, obviously. This is really encouraging because a week ago we saw Dana Bash of CNN say that the student encampment protests demanding divestment from Israel from their universities were like 1930s Europe, in the sense that the protesters were like about to prime the United States to advocate for the genocide of the Jewish people. I mean, it was incredibly unhinged.
Hysterical.
She's moderating the first debate, by the way, so I'm looking forward
with
to all...
Tepper, right?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
The questions, I'm just preparing everybody, about campus anti-Semitism are going to make your head explode. But I want to give CNN credit, though, here, because this is really important reporting. This shows exactly what Zionism is. It shows how it's intertwined with white supremacy. And they played this they didn't put it on YouTube or do it on their international channel. This was on Anderson Cooper, so primetime CNN. Now, there's some violence here. Just a warning to people that are watching. You'll see here the counter-protesters basically hitting the college kids at the campus encampment on UCLA. But this whole segment is worth playing, so let's do that.
This is the worst violence of any of the ongoing college protests. UCLA, where counter-protesters used sticks and boards against a pro-Palestine encampment. It was more than 3 hours of unrestrained violence the night of April 30th that led to injuries and bloody scenes, as campus security and law enforcement allowed it to continue.
They were there spraying, they were there pulling barriers, and they were there to very clearly do some serious harm to the students who were on campus.
When you look at the counter-protesters, how many of them were UCLA students?
I would say basically none of them.
Who are the most aggressive offenders? A CNN investigation of hundreds of videos from multiple sources shows many of them are outsiders, not UCLA students. Among the people who showed up that night, far-right with no apparent connection to the Middle East war, others driven by Israel beliefs. Among them, this man. He strikes a pro-Palestine protester with a long white pole and is part of a mob that pummels the man as he falls to the ground. Stop. He's seen in multiple videos wearing this white mask, striking the barriers, throwing objects into the encampment. Without his mask, we see who he is. 18-year-old Idan On of Beverly Hills, a senior at a local high school.
Come inside to the kitchen. How do I get inside?
I spoke with his mother.
Hi there. Are you Sharon? Hi.
How are you?
Hi. Let me introduce us.
She did not want to be on camera, but quickly identified her son from this picture at UCLA that night. She described in detail how her son found the mask and pole on the ground and said he was defending himself in this fight. On her Facebook page, Idan On's mother posted and circled a screen grab of her son from a local TV station. She wrote in Hebrew, Idan went to bully the Palestinian students in the tents at UCLA. Idan's mother and father proudly support Israel and defended their son's actions at UCLA, saying he is heading to Israel to join the IDF. After our interview, she texted to say Idan denies being at UCLA.
Okay, I just had to pause it right there. Well, this is a serious story, and the UCLA student journalists were brutalized by police as well. There were arrests made just of the peaceful protesters, not of these freaks. But isn't that just so emblematic of Israel? It's just encapsulates
Right
it.
he has a right to defend himself.
He has a right
he just
to
found it on the ground and started whacking people with it.
You see him assaulting people. Oh, it's self-defense. She admits to all of the crimes on Facebook and then denies the crimes later.
Yeah.
That is Israel personified.
You got to work on that info security. No, I don't want to be on camera, but yes, that is my son at the crime scene.
Yes, and then no, it's not. By the way, just because maybe he might face some disciplinary.
I don't know
action.
why his mother. I mean, ask somebody with more credibility.
Yeah, keep going.
Exit to say Idan denies being at UCLA. Older men were also at the front of the violence. Tom Bibian recorded pulling bike racks, plywood, kicking protesters, throwing cones at the students in the encampment, water bottles at protesters, and yelling expletives.
Funded by Jerry Seinfeld's wife, by the way.
Bibian why he'd gone to the campus that night.
Hi, you're Mr. Bibian.
Yeah, can you turn that off? You don't have permission to record me.
Bibian was wearing the same jacket he had on in the video from UCLA. He's a Los Angeles resident, age 42, seen at a 2022 pro-Trump protest outside the Los Angeles FBI office. He did not want to explain why he's on video doing this.
You're being a little rude, and I'm going to call the police if you don't leave.
Sure. Okay.
We identified not just Tom Bibian, but other older men who have no apparent affiliation with UCLA.
I mean, you've seen them at how many other events?
Lots of different events, school board meetings, city council meetings.
Angie Gavant is a Los Angeles
Brown
area
ships.
public school mom who's been tracking right-wing protesters in her area. The group who she'd seen protesting gay rights in public schools were drawn to UCLA that night.
The revolution ain't happening tonight. Man down, man down.
Though they were clearly at UCLA that night, there's no evidence these men participated in the violence.
Here comes the Jew song, man. Cover your ears.
The man who is live streaming, Narek Polyan, appears to be a persistent agitator who posts anti-Jewish tropes on his social media accounts. But at UCLA, he stood with the pro-Israel crowd.
Huh.
I'm Kyung Law from CNN.
Well, there's a way to
Polyan
understand
claimed
this.
to us that he has a child at UCLA, though a student didn't accompany him that night, and that he had good intentions.
I was definitely keeping the peace, okay, at least trying to.
You weren't there to make it worse?
No, of course I wasn't there to make it worse.
I hate to say it, but I was expecting us to start working on an obituary the next day because I thought something that serious would happen to the students in the encampment.
Do you feel like they won?
Based on the way they were cheering when the police arrived Tuesday night, I think they might feel that they won.
King Law joins me now. It's still stunning to me that the police, I mean, there seemed to be some police around, but clearly didn't seem like police really moved in very quickly at all to stop this. You can clearly find these people. What's law enforcement saying they're going to do, or if anything?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And we actually asked them. We went to the key law enforcement agencies. We started with UCLA Police Department. We reached out to them via email, their office line, text messages, cell phones. And despite our numerous attempts and very specific questions, we did not get any response, a clear response about their response that night or any follow-up investigation. We also reached out to the CHP and
we get the
LAPD.
sense
They
here.
referred.
Anderson Cooper, who has been rumored to have been spotted in an IDF sweatshirt in the past, according to our friend who's been on the show, Dr. Thrasher. But yeah, it's that's good. It's good. This is there was a New York Times piece on settler violence that was very well done. I got to read a bit of it earlier this morning. Tides are shifting. I mean, it's so welcome, obviously, but it's taken way too long. And you can just see there how Zionism aligns itself with fascism,
Yep.
and then the police force aligns itself with that.
Some of those that workforces are the same that burn crosses.
The battle lines are beginning to become a bit more clear, even if they were muddled for some people before when they didn't understand Zionism, and then also because the Democratic president is the person who is supporting this kind of movement.
Yep.
Even if he might say that he's not.
He's smearing the protesters.
He's smearing the protesters, which does that work for them. And this fits with a story that came out this morning that I headlined a second ago, that California State, and that was UCLA University, they placed the Sonoma State campus president, Mike Lee, on leave after he agreed to protesters' demands to involve them in university decision-making and pursue divestment from Israel. Lee sent a campus-wide memo Tuesday indicating that he had made several concessions to occupants of a pro-Palestinian encampment on campus. The memo was sent without the appropriate approvals, CSU Chancellor Mildred Garcia said in a statement, adding that she and let's scroll down, and the 23 campus CSU Systems Board are actively reviewing the matter. For now, because of this insubordination and the consequences it has brought upon the system, President Lee has been placed on administrative leave.
The consequences is it brought about the system. Look at this language they have to use.
Exactly. Lee, apparently other university presidents have said that they will study the divestment, but Lee went further. He told the campus that he would initiate an academic boycott of Israel, in which links to study abroad programs in the country would be removed from university pamphlets, among other measures. He also agreed to work with a local chapter of the activist group Students' Justice in Palestine to form an advisory council on some decisions. So because he didn't say that SJP is like working with Hamas and funded by Iran and is a terrorist organization, and decided to listen to the students he's supposed to represent and protect, CSU, this is the California public school system, is placing him on administrative leave.
Yeah, and just a simple reframe that's really important. It is not the protesters or these professors that side with them that are causing the disruption or division on campus. It is the support for Israel that these campuses are engaged in.
Exactly. All right, folks, we're going to get to Regina Kunzel in just a second, but first, a word from one of our favorite sponsors, Fast Growing Trees. Did you know that Fast Growing Trees is the biggest online nursery in the U.S. with more than 10,000 different kinds of plants and over 2 million happy customers in the U.S.? They have everything you could possibly want, like fruit trees, palm trees, evergreens, house plants, and so much more. Whatever you're interested in, they have it for you. Find the perfect fit for your climate and space. Fast Growing Trees makes it easy to order online, and your plants are shipped directly to your door in 1 to 2 days. And along with their 30-day Alive and Thrive guarantee, they offer free plant consultation forever. So I don't have a ton of space in my apartment, and I do not have a way with plants. I feel like I kill them all the time. But this Fast Growing Trees hanging kind of thing that I have for my bookshelf, it's surviving. And that's because they have such great tools. And
the harshest conditions.
Right. My care. The plant is surviving even though I am the plant parent. And that is not something I could say before. And Fast Growing Trees has been very helpful in that regard. You don't need to have a yard or a lot of space. You can grow lemon, avocado, olive, or fig trees inside your home on top of the wide variety of houseplants available. The experts at Fast Growing Trees curate thousands of plants so you can find the perfect fit for your specific climate, location, and needs. You don't have to drive around to nurseries and big gardening centers. Fast Growing Trees makes it easy to order online, and your plants are shipped to your door in 1 to 2 days. Whether you're looking to add some privacy, shade, or natural beauty to your yard, Fast Growing Trees has in-house experts ready to help you make the right selection with growing and care advice available 24/7. You can talk to a plant expert about your soil type, landscape design, how to take care of your plants, and everything else you need. No green thumb required. This spring, they have the best deals online, up to half off select plants and other deals. And listeners to our show get an additional 15% off their first purchase when using the code MAJORITY at checkout. That's an additional 15% off at fastgrowingtrees.com using the code MAJORITY at checkout. Fastgrowingtrees.com. Code MAJORITY. Offer is valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions may apply. All right, folks, quick break, and we'll be right back with Regina. We are back, and we are joined now by Regina Kunzel, professor of history and women's gender and sexuality studies at Yale University, author of In the Shadow of Diagnosis, Psychiatric Power and Queer Life. Regina, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks very much for having me.
So, perhaps it's helpful to start here with how psychiatry came to be in and of itself and integrate into healthcare outside of kind of being, you know, professionals or people that work in asylums or state-run facilities, as you talk about. In the 20th century, how did psychiatry become a part of medical care?
So psychiatrists, as you mentioned, it's a field that starts taking shape in the 19th century, and most psychiatrists at that point are working in asylums. They're doing sort of custodial care of people who are chronically mentally ill or people with dementia. They're really battling for their own professional legitimacy. They're worried they're not taken seriously as doctors. And increasingly into the 20th century, they start making their main business is not severe mental illness, but rather is what they call problems in living. And so they cast their net very broadly to capture, again, not just mental illness, but you know what they might think of as the sane but not entirely normal, and that lets them cast quite a wide net in there and to really expand their ambitions.
And that wide net that you described, what were some of the other categories that they dragged into that net in terms of deeming someone either delinquent or mentally ill?
Well, in some ways it would be very familiar to us now, you know, so people with troubled marriages, people who are depressed, people who are anxious, and they, you know, psychiatrists really make the case that they are the experts to go to for these just basic problems in living. Of course, among those claims that they make are that they're the experts of over the problems posed by homosexuality and gender nonconformity. And so those are among the things that they say they can treat and cure.
And how did they center conversion in their conception of care, and how relevant and enduring is that today?
So this is a really novel claim that American psychiatrists start to make around 1940. It requires them to revise the claims made by Sigmund Freud. Freud had theorized homosexuality as really a normal stage of development that everyone would go through, ideally for Freud, passing through that stage to mature heterosexuality. But he also thought that there was something that he called universal human bisexuality, by which he meant a kind of mixed sex constitution where we all have elements of masculinity and femininity, and that was another way that Freud had of explaining homosexuality. And American psychiatrists around 1940 start really rejecting those ideas and revising Freud, and revising him to make the point that that homosexuality is indeed a mental disorder, and one that they could treat and cure. And they are very good at getting the word out about that idea, that claim. And so, you know, this is something that certainly fills the published work of psychiatrists in this period, but it expands beyond to be a much more sort of popular idea in the broader culture. It's picked up by advice columnists, by popular writers, psychiatrists are writing popular books themselves. And so it's a very widely accepted idea in this period.
And then you have this the DSM, right, where these categories or this conception of having to convert or fix people's homosexuality is codified. Can you talk about the DSM, the different iterations of it? What is it? Because it's so central even now when we're talking about trans rights.
DSM stands for
Regina,
Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders.
Okay, you cut out a little bit. You know, honestly, maybe we just try the phones. I'm sorry about that. We're having a bit of an issue with hearing you. So we'll be right back, folks. We are back with Regina here, and we have her on the phone, so hopefully we'll be able to hear responses here. So I was asking, what were the different iterations of the DSM? How was it important to categorizing homosexuality or gender nonconformity in this way during this period?
Right. So the DSM stands for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It's published by the American Psychiatric Association, which is the main organization of the field. It's a kind of catalog of mental disorders. Some refer to it as psychiatry's Bible. And it really functions as a kind of definitive list of what psychiatrists determine to be mental disorders. It offers a set of diagnostic codes that doctors use, but it's also used as a reference by courts, by insurance companies, and public policy. So it has a kind of authority and importance that's way beyond the clinic. And it also, the other thing I would say about the DSM is that it effectively performs a kind of territorial maneuver for psychiatrists, because when they identify and name aspects of human behavior as illnesses or disorders, they say they're basically declaring them under their legitimate domain. So the first edition of the DSM was published in 1952. It's gone through 5 major revisions since then, so we're on some version of DSM-5 now. And that first edition identified homosexuality and what they called transvestism, alongside pedophilia, fetishism, sadism. They identified them as pathological sexual deviations under a kind of larger category of personality disorders. And so that was the case in the first edition in 1952 and the second in 1968. And it's that inclusion, that formal inclusion of homosexuality in the DSM that identifies homosexuality as a mental disorder that gay activists really start focusing their attention on in the late 60s and in their efforts to really overthrow psychiatric authority and challenge the idea that queerness is a mental disorder.
And can you also talk about during the period of when psychiatry gets a little bit more integrated into mainstream healthcare outside of the roles that we discussed earlier in asylums or state-run facilities, how the Second World War kind of fed into that as a part of doing these screenings for people entering into the military? It almost formalized that as well.
Sure. Well, one of the claims that I make in my book is that psychiatry really relies on its claims to expertise around homosexuality in particular to broker these collaborations with the state and in the process really expand their power. This is a time when homosexuality is seen as a very as a very serious threat to national security. It's linked to communism. And so, to say we're the experts of this thing is to attract the attention of the U.S. state, right? And so during the Second World War, we see one of those very significant collaborations where psychiatrists, recalling the First World War and what was then known as shell shock and the costs of sort of mental disability after that war, tried to come up with some guidelines to screen out people that they said would be unfit for service. And it's very ironic that homosexuality is included in that in some ways, because one of the main architects of those screening guidelines, Harry Stack Sullivan, was a kind of closeted gay man himself. But they do come up with these screening procedures. Of course, they cast them as very humane,
right,
and progressive. But it also becomes a way for psychiatrists to get the word out to literally millions of people that homosexuality is basically a disqualifying disorder.
Yes, and you can see there how with psychiatry becoming intertwined with the military, and that has lasted throughout. We're having conversations to this day about trans people being a part of the military, and of course the don't ask, don't tell policy of the Clinton administration. Right. I mean, you can see how these are really, in some ways, the front lines for social control as it relates to gender and sexuality.
Absolutely. That's exactly right.
Yeah, I mean, so that's not too harsh to say. I think, having criticism, I'm psychiatry and medications, I know they help people, right? But so much of what you write about it's such a it made me think twice about how the field in and of itself constructed and has these systemic flaws.
It does, and of course those flaws were illuminated not just by gay activists, but by a kind of assortment of activists and scholars who would come under the heading of anti-psychiatry. So this is also a time, and that's a kind of fortuitous moment for gay activists to start this assault on psychiatric authority. Other people are doing it too. Other people are pointing this out as well, sometimes in very harsh terms. Right.
Yes. So can you talk a bit about the role of LGBTQ activism in maybe changing and challenging these notions, starting, I guess, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and of course the people, the AIDS crisis, I think, laid bare a lot of medical discrimination against LGBTQ people, obviously. So what was that period like, and how did activists begin to challenge these notions?
Well, these ideas carried so much authority in the culture that for a long time it was hard for gay activists to take them on very directly. And so if we think about homophile activists in the 50s and 60s are quite deferential to psychiatric authority. These are the people who are telling them that they're sick, but homophile activists are inviting them to their conferences and letting them, publish work in their journals. But beginning in the 60s and especially in the late 60s, gay and lesbian activists really start challenging psychiatry more directly. And starting in about 1970, they start targeting the annual meeting of the American Psychiatric Association directly, and they turn it into a kind of political stage, to confront psychiatrists. They do that from the audience. They heckle and disrupt sessions. This is, of course, a kind of post-Stonewall movement, and so activist modes are changing. They brought megaphones. They start shouting people down, and eventually they're invited to speak on panels, and so they speak publicly on those panels at the meetings of the APA. Again, they're not the only ones calling out psychiatry. This is a time of broader critique of psychiatry from feminists, from Black activists, from disability activists. And it's also a really turbulent time within the field of psychiatry because some psychiatrists are starting to challenge the domination of psychoanalysts in the profession. Psychoanalysts had really been ascendant through the 50s and the 60s, and some people are starting to question that, and that's a kind of fortuitous timing thing. So you have gay activists assaulting from beyond, but psychiatrists starting to challenge from within. And then from there, we move to this great showdown in 1973 when the APA meets in Honolulu for the annual conference. And that, of course, is the year that the APA votes to remove it, remove homosexuality from the DSM.
And that's 1973, you said?
That's 1973. It's a little complicated because the Board of Trustees of the APA vote in December of 1973 to remove it. That's incredibly shocking and very troubling to many psychiatrists who are opposed to that decision. And so those people demand a referendum of the entire APA membership in an attempt to overturn that. And they got enough signatures on the proposal to force a popular vote. So the APA sends a ballot out to its 10,000 members in 1974. And the motion carried the vote of the majority, not an overwhelming majority. 58% of APA members voted to delete homosexuality from the DSM. But that happens, and that happened, we're just now a month plus the 50th anniversary of that moment. That happened in April of 1974.
And can you speak about its endurance as it relates to trans identity? Because we're in a real moment here where there is some exciting medicine in terms of gender-affirming care, but of course there's a state crackdown by Republicans, and that there's been some shift, I think, seemingly from American psychiatry. But how did that take its form, and how much further does it need to go?
So the first edition of the DSM to not include homosexuality, and that's the DSM-3 that is published in 1980, is also the first to include the new diagnosis of gender identity disorder that is now listed in the DSM as gender dysphoria. And so this moment that gets celebrated as a great victory for gay rights is also linked, as you point out, with the kind of formal pathologizing of trans people. And so it's a very complicated history, and some would point to a kind of almost a kind of causal relationship between those things. You have gay activists making the case for the exclusion of homosexuality from the DSM, basically saying we're not that. We're not gender deviants. Right. So that happens in 1980, and as I mentioned, it is still in the DSM. I will say that, when I wrote this book, I sometimes wondered if this particular past might seem antiquated and maybe irrelevant. I confess, anticipate the things that would make this book timely. Sort of the resurgence of pathologizing ideas about queerness that we see in narratives of grooming, that pose the mere existence of queer people in proximity to children as somehow sexualizing those children.
Yep.
And I really didn't anticipate the war on trans life that we're living through right now. There have been 550 anti-trans bills introduced so far in 2024. We're only in May. And the right is really weaponizing that status of gender dysphoria as a formal diagnosis in the DSM. And they are working to restore the authority of psychiatrists as the kind of gatekeepers of transition. And so, this story that so often is told as ending in 1973, we are seeing reverberate now. You know, there is, as I say in the book, there's something. I'm telling the history of something of the stickiness or the adhesiveness of this association between queerness and transness and sickness. I think that really persists today.
I think you're right, and the work is really timely. I'd encourage everybody to check it out. It's called In the Shadow of Diagnosis, Psychiatric Power and Queer Life. It's beautifully written and, you know, speaks a bit about your experience, Regina, as well as has a lot of great historical knowledge, and I really appreciate your time today. Thanks so much for coming on and working through with us with the technology.
Thanks very much.
Have a good day.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Thank you too. Bye.
All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will be speaking to Beshara Doumani, professor of Palestinian Studies at Brown, about the 76th anniversary of the Nakba, which was yesterday. We are back, and we are joined now by Beshara Doumani, Mahmoud Darwish Professor of Palestinian Studies at Brown University, here with us to commemorate the 76th anniversary of the Nakba, which was yesterday. Thanks so much for coming on the show today, Professor.
Thanks, Emma, for having me.
So yesterday, as I mentioned, May 15th, the 76th anniversary of the Nakba, which means catastrophe. Many of our viewers are familiar with this historical event, but for those who are not, what is the Nakba?
It's a war that resulted in the expulsion of over 80% of the Palestinian population from their homes and their villages and towns. The end of Palestine as a state, largely destruction of Palestinian society, and the establishment of the State of Israel after the British withdrew on May 15th officially after colonizing Palestine since World War I.
And it's on the side of Israel, they celebrate it as the Israeli Independence Day. I guess this year, because of differences in the Gregorian calendar, it was the day before that they celebrated it. But, you know, I mean, that's a bit perverse, especially within this current context. And I hadn't realized, I know that there are many laws on the books within Israel that discriminate against the Palestinian minority, but that even observing the Nakba, you could be in violation of the law if you're a Palestinian minority living within Israel.
That's right. Criminalizing Palestinian identity, Palestinian aspirations is enshrined in many, many laws affecting primarily Palestinians who are citizens of Israel, which is part of the Palestinian population. But there are also Palestinians living under military occupation in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and of course in East Jerusalem as well. And they are subject to much more than such laws. They're subject to an actual, real oppression via military means.
And, you know, I was reading this morning the letter written by the latest Biden appointee to resign in protest, Lily Greenberg Call. She's a Jewish American, and she spoke about how she feels that Biden is making Jews the face of the U.S. war machine. But she also had this quote where she says, Nakba and Shoah, the Hebrew word for Holocaust, mean the same thing, catastrophe. I thought it was just a really beautiful way, I guess, for her to show how her Jewishness is teaching her to oppose this ongoing genocide. But it also underscored how the Nakba is such a pain, a constant pain for Palestinians that never really gets discussed. Can you talk about how omnipresent the Nakba is in the cultural memory of Palestinian people?
Sure. There's not a Palestinian alive who has not suffered directly or indirectly from the Nakba. When we talk about the massacres, over 30 of them that took place during this period, the war, the expulsions, the lives of people just were completely destroyed. They lost their land, they lost their possessions, they lost their houses, they couldn't go back. They had to rebuild their lives, and that has affected every single person because these, not just these memories, but these conditions are passed down through generations. So Palestinians, for example, are fragmented today, physically, geographically, but they are one people because they have this common experience. And many of the older generation that experienced it directly preferred not to talk about it, and that is a common problem for all traumatized people. And so it has been kind of rediscovered and re-understood generation after generation by Palestinians, and it's become the major definition of what it means to be Palestinian today. That is to say, the world's oldest stateless refugee population.
And when in 1948 and the Nakba, we could talk about how it's an ongoing process as well. But I just wanted to paint a picture for the audience. Can you talk about the destruction of Palestinian life that occurred on that day and is still occurring? Cultural centers, homes that were taken. Say a Palestinian was going to a wedding and they came home and an Israeli Jewish family had taken it, and that's the end of that. Those stories are so common. If you could just give people a sense of what the Nakba looked like.
Well, watch what's going on in Gaza today and think of the key elements of what's going on. One is absolute destruction of the built environment. So 1948 was a moment in which over 400 to 500 Palestinian villages and towns were bulldozed, dynamited, or destroyed so that the people who lived in them cannot come back. There massive displacement in Gaza today. There was massive displacement in 1948 as well. But these are what I call the earthquakes of the Palestinian experience.
Right.
And I would add 1967 to that, because people forget, but this anniversary is coming up soon on June 5th, but over 300,000 Palestinians were expelled in that war, and over 150 villages were destroyed. So the process, which has been going on for over a century now, of displacing a people and taking their land continues. Would pay attention to the earthquakes, but there's the tectonic shifts, the structural violence that happens on a daily basis, and we see that best exemplified in the West Bank today. Settlements, Jewish-only colonies are being built on Palestinian lands, and people are being expelled from their villages, and it's happening, acre by acre, day by day. That is the kind of a death by 1,000 cuts that the Palestinians have been experiencing for many decades now. These tectonic shifts of one people replacing another and taking their land. But every once in a while, you get this earthquake. And 1948 was by far the biggest earthquake.
1967. talk about how what's called the 6-Day War resulted in the fracturing of Palestinian society in the way that we know to this day, creating the territories of East Jerusalem, of the West Bank, and then the open air prison that is Gaza, which has been, basically, even though Israel says that they left militarily, they've controlled every aspect of life in Gaza for years at this point.
That's right. In 1967, Israel preemptively attacked the Arab states and it quadrupled its size by taking over the Sinai Peninsula, the Golan Heights, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem and Gaza. Gaza, East Jerusalem, and the West Bank were what's left over of the Palestinian state that the British controlled. They constitute about 22% of the land of that mandate, Palestine. The Egyptians were in control of Gaza. The Jordanians annexed the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Ironically, the 1967 war reunited Palestinians inside of Palestine. For the first time since 1948, Palestinians in the West Bank or East Jerusalem or Gaza could go and see their relatives and their homes, or what was left of their homes, or at least the places where their homes used to exist inside Israel today. And that has completely changed after the Oslo Accords, where a new matrix of control was imposed on the Palestinians, which limited movement according to a pass system very similar to South Africa. In other words, after Oslo, Palestinians in East Jerusalem would find it very difficult to go to outside to the West Bank. People in the West Bank couldn't go to Gaza, and so on and so forth. And that fragmentation continues until today, especially in Gaza, which was put under a strict siege since 1991, 1992, but incredibly increased after 2006.
You mentioned Oslo, and this is not exactly tied into our kind of Nakba conversation, but it's been in the news because Hillary Clinton is going on television and saying that, well, the Palestinians didn't want peace and the kids that are protesting don't understand history. What happened in the Oslo Accords, and what was the reality of the deal that was offered to the Palestinians?
This is very relevant to this moment because the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which negotiated the Oslo Accord secretly with Israel, not even the United States knew about it at the time, was effectively a destroyed organization at that time. It had lost its money, it has lost its embassies, it had lost its most of their rank and file, and they basically agreed to a land for peace formula that did not specify what the outcome of the negotiations which would follow the agreement would be. In other words, they agreed to a car without an engine. It couldn't get anywhere because the Oslo Agreement did not recognize the right of Palestinians to have their own state, to self-determination, and to the end of the occupation. It just agreed to talk about these things. And the power balance being what it is, the Palestinians found that in the post-Oslo period, the exact opposite of land for peace took place. The number of Israeli colonies inside the West Bank doubled, the population tripled, the restrictions were magnified, and what has been created since Oslo is effectively a one-state condition. Between the river and the sea, Israel controls everything in an ethno-nationalist kind of supremacist state in which there are different rights to different people depending on their religion or ethnicity.
Right. And can you mentioned this one-state reality. This is why the conversations about a two-state solution are like basically we could be having a conversation about Harry Potter or something. It's not, we're not living in a reality world. It's a fantasy world.
Yeah.
I mean, what is your assessment of that kind of, I almost do feel like maybe we're seeing some shift from that being the liberal Orthodox opinion, but there's no, it's both wrong morally, but also impractical because there's no, because of the reality that you just described and the 1967 borders being what they are and this fracturing and then the settlements that have continued, it's just impossible. It's impossible from a geographic perspective, let alone, of course, the fact that it is a continuation of solidifying what the Nakba created.
That's right. With tremendous U.S. military, economic, and political support, Israel has done everything it can to prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state or two-state solution by making it the infrastructure for their control over the area so dense and so thick that it can never be undone. So the importance of the Nakba commemoration is precisely that. It shifts the focus from this idea of a nationalist conflict in which partition is the only solution, that is to say, a two-state solution, into one which recognizes that between the river and the sea, there are people who are interlocked together in an inseparable way, and it has to be transformed in the sense that it should be a place where there's equality and justice for all, and not one group ruling completely over another and using all sorts of structural violence to push them off their land. And so 1948 brings our attention back to the source, the root of the issue, that the two-state solution or partition simply cannot solve. Because the settler colonial movement didn't start in 1948. It started long before, in the late 1800s. And so if we want to really find a way to coexist in peace, that has to be dealt with, plus the issue, of course, of the return or the right of return, whether they choose to exercise it or not, of the Palestinians to their homeland.
And so, returning to the theme of the Nakba, many people discuss it as an ongoing process as opposed to the earthquake that you described.
Right.
How would you explain that to people, that the fact that the Nakba is still with us to this day and the driving force here?
Right, because the three key elements that constitute the Nakba are things that continue to happen on a daily basis between these earthquakes. That's what I meant by the tectonic shifts. So the twin engines of this transformation of Palestine and the Palestinians into a stateless people and then into Israel is based on demographic displacement and land appropriation. These two processes started in the late 1800s and continue until today. If you look at what's happening in the West Bank just since October 7th, you'll see this very clearly. But those processes, these engines, never stopped. And the third element is what I call the iron law, which is the refusal to accept the Palestinians as a political community, that is to say, a community that has a right to have rights. And this idea of refusing the right of Palestinians for self-determination, statehood, equality, was enshrined in the Balfour Declaration in 1917, when they were referred to the indigenous population, which were 94% or so of the population at the time, as non-Jews who have civil and religious rights, but not political rights. And this has continued until today. The Palestinians still don't have the political right to organize themselves as a political community that's recognized effectively by the world.
Can you talk about your experience as a Palestinian academic, Palestinian American academic? I mean, we've sung the praises of Edward Said, and we've seen what's happening at Columbia University, right? With the the fact that that university and other Ivy, you work at Brown, they have a robust history of Palestinian academia with Saeed and now Rashid Khalidi. What has it been like? I mean, what is it like to be in these institutions that deny your history with like a very with incredible force?
My own lifetime has seen a major transformation. When I started at the University of Pennsylvania, the first course I ever taught was History of the Palestinians, which to my knowledge was the first time that such a course has ever been taught. And you couldn't really say the word Palestine in polite company. They would immediately go quiet and think something bad has been said. And now I'm a professor of history, but also occupy the Mahmoud Darwish Chair for Palestinian Studies at Brown. And the difference is almost like night and day. Today it's recognized that the Palestinians, you can talk about them without being ostracized, and you can even teach it as a field of study in major universities. That accomplishment has everything to do with the ability of Palestinians on the ground to remain steadfast and fight for their rights and create such a space for people like me to be able to teach about them. That has shifted a lot since October 7th, in which there's a real attempt to criminalize Palestinian speech and pro-Palestinian sentiment. And it's done mostly as an alliance between white supremacists or evangelical, right-wing evangelical groups who are trying to use this as a wedge issue for a larger battle over the culture of this country. But they are being helped by major establishment organizations such as AIPAC or ADL and others who are doing everything they can to criminalize Palestinian speech in the universities. And I must say, the repression I've felt over the last 40 years of teaching has always been around, but after October 7, it's really increased tremendously. Just like we saw after 9/11, a real uptick, we are seeing one now. But it's a little bit more dangerous because universities are not what they used to be. That's one thing. They've changed a lot. And there is a real push by Congress, especially the House, to investigate and to criminalize. There's been changes in many of the Republican states about public universities and how they operate. We're in the midst of a huge campaign to transform higher education in this country, and I think it's a very difficult moment. And the Palestinian issue has become central to that.
Do you see this repression by these institutions as a sign that they are growing weaker and more desperate, or that they're showing their strength?
Yeah, so there's a general rule that says the more violence you have to use in order to get even less political dividends than you normally would get for that amount of violence, if that trend continues, that means that the party who's using the violence is getting weaker. They just have to do so. One would ask, for example, why is it that for many decades there weren't a criminalization effect going on in universities on Palestinian speech? It was just part of the woodwork. It just was there. But now they have to use all sorts of violent means in order to impose that. Yes, I think I agree that a global movement for justice, especially among young people, has seen the Palestinian issue as a litmus test of what it really means to be progressive or for justice, and not to have a double standard about that, that keeps brown and black and other people of color or third world people outside the equation of who deserves rights and who doesn't. If we want to be consistent, then the Palestinian issue becomes the litmus test for consistency. And against that worldwide, really global development in the last decade or so, but especially after October 7, we've seen it. The repression has increased precisely because the party who's doing the repression is getting weaker in terms of popular opinion.
It's good to know, and it gives me some hope. And truly, my last question here, but before I let you go, as a professor of history, are you seeing a bit of a reorientation academically towards like an understanding of the world and and governments that's based less on autocracies versus democracies or liberal societies versus repressive societies, to one that is more about the impacts of colonialism and power in that instance? Because I think that this is a major difference, I would say, in some people of an older generation that grew up in a Cold War era versus my generation that is very invested in this Palestinian issue.
Right. There's a disenchantment, it seems to me, with what I would call the liberal order, based on nation states and based on rule of law. Younger people are seeing very clearly when it comes to environmental justice and climate change and the power of corporations and a million other things, the nation-state model and the rule of law are not really working, except for some people. And so that entire system is under stress right now. And we see that very clearly in the Palestinian issue because the United States is enabling what the International Court of Justice and the United Nations are saying are genocide.
Yep.
And they're doing it while pretending to be a liberal democratic party. Mm-hmm. And what happened to your values? Why are some lives worse than others here for you? This is not just a Palestinian story. It's a story that many people inside this country and beyond can identify with. And so this liberal system is under great stress. And I don't think many people know what will emerge out of this experience, but the days of double standards and ability to normalize the oppression of other people just because they're not like us, I think are over.
Well, I'm hopeful as well. It's encouraging to see the shift in conversation. Beshara Doumani, a Mahmoud Darwish professor of Palestinian Studies at Brown University, here with us to commemorate the 76th anniversary of the Nakba, which was yesterday. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Dema. Take care.
Take care. All right, folks, with that, we're going to wrap up the free part of this program and head into the not free part, the fun part. The fun half is what it has been called.
Or at least you have to make a modicum of effort to get it for free.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're supposed to not be advertising that, but yes.
I'm anti-commercial.
Yeah, I mean, like, let's be real. If you want to become a member, you could still see so much of our work for free. But becoming a member at jointhemajorityReport.com is really just if you like us and support us.
And you have some extra money around and you want
to
support us. Hey, Bradley.
Yeah. And if you want, if you support our work, you're able to contribute.
You want us to help contribute to our on the way retirement funds.
Yeah. Oh God, I still have to get that done. That it would be helpful. It's we're trying our best, and if you like our work, and you can IM the show if you do. That is the feature that you get basically if you become a member. You can IM the show. JoinTheMajorityReport.com.
We are really big on YouTube, and I remember when that wasn't the case. When I started here, we had like 35,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
And
really?
Yeah. And we really just on here not because of any sort of like ad revenue, but because we just wanted to get the podcast seen by people.
Yeah.
But the thing that's scary about it is it can all go away. So supporting us directly and not giving money to YouTube or something. And also, if you get the podcast, if you like to listen to the podcast, it's the best way to not have to hear the advertisements before the first break. So
That's true. And it's really amazing how, reliant we are on these basically intermediary streaming services. I remember when Facebook revenue was, we got Brandon, Facebook revenue was, what's up, Brandon? All right, he's having trouble with the connection. Just mute him if you can, please. Okay. Get the hell out of here. Well, I forget what I was saying. It's really not that important. Point being is just like it's a precarious situation to be reliant on these companies like Facebook and YouTube and all that. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Left Reckoning. We're having Nick Boland on to talk about a piece, and I wish I could remember where the piece was in now, but it's about seasonal workers and the sort of labor class of that. Because this is something that really speaks to me as a Upper Midwesterner. I know lots of people who, for instance, go to Montana to work ski season, or go to the lakes regions to work the summer rush on lake cabins and stuff like that. And those people really, like many, need healthcare universally because a lot of those sorts of things don't. And so we're talking about Nick about this sort of stuff. So patreon.com/Left Reckoning. Speaking of, if you got some more money around and want to get some extra content and listen to me and David Griscom talk about America and labor. So check that out, patreon.com/Left Reckoning.
On ESPN, we spoke about the NBA, NHL playoffs, basically. YouTube.com/ESPN show for that, and then we'll be back on Monday with the more updates. Miller Time says, why is Emma so mean to Brandon? Well, he's got to figure out his frickin' technology, and then we'll be nice.
He was disturbing us.
Yes, exactly. All right, we'll get to them in the fun half then. 646-257-3920. See you there.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it to my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare! You bring back DJ Dinner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Dinner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break. That's fucking nonsense.
You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males.
Psych. Fuck them. Snowflake says what? What? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back. Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back, and we're just bringing in Binder and Brandon. We're opening up the phone lines. The number is 646-257-3920. We'll read some IMs while we're getting them set up here. Dick Durbin, superfan. We hope you enjoyed the free half, free of commercials. Now stay tuned for the fun half, free of fun. Just kidding. Love you guys. Coming up on the 1-year membership anniversary. Wow, thank you very much. And we will have some fun today. We have fun clips, and we have fun friends. Look at that.
These fun friends.
Hi, fun friends. What's happening over on your show, Matt Binder? Matt Binder.
Sure. Hello, everybody. Glad to know that I'm called a fun friend. I like that.
Fun friend.
Fun friend.
Thank you. So yesterday, youtube.com/Matt Binder on the live stream basically did a look at, what's been going on this week. So you can check that out, youtube.com/Matt Binder. It'll be up as a podcast at doomcast.com.
Gotcha. Are we live on the fun half here?
Oh, good call, Emma.
Okay.
We're do the switch over right now.
Switch.
But Brandon, do you want to plug your stuff as well?
Yes. Brandon?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yep,
can hear you.
Hello?
Yeah, there's a bit of a lag,
I
though.
think you're lagging.
Yeah.
Across the Atlantic over there. But
And
I'm going to count down and you pick up when you hear the end, Brandon. 5, 4, 3...
2, 1.
Oh no, dude.
Oh
Brandon,
no.
I don't know if this is gonna work.
I will restart. I'm gonna try to restart one time, and then if not, I'll drop off. I will say I do want to plug a great interview that we're going to have up on the Discourse with Vonk.
Say again.
Oh boy.
Oh no. Oh yeah, we gotta boot him.
All right, well, please check out the Discourse because apparently it's a great interview. Oh, jeez.
That's it. He's gonna have to IM us about what he wants to plug.
I was worried it was me at first, lagging, and I was like, "Oh no, you guys can't hear me."
Now your connection stabilized too.
I know.
Yeah.
Wow.
Poor Brandon.
was so bad it was making Binder's worse.
I know. Oh gosh, pixelation by osmosis.
I actually wasn't sure what was going. Like, I wasn't sure if he understood what you were doing when you were counting down because the pause was so unbelievably long.
It was so long. All right, we'll read some IMs before we get the info that Brandon about the Discourse, the episode. Yeah. Registered Voider says, "Can we get an EmMajority Report exclusive Fun Half song?" I don't know. I don't make those calls. That's DJ Danarchying whatever.
Or anybody in the audience. We haven't had a new user submission, which is like we don't solicit people to do free labor for us. But
Well, you just did.
But I am going to.
Yes, but we love them. That's a part of it. Midwest Mike says, "Great interviews as always. Historical perspective is so important. The colonial projects in Palestine post World War I was only possible because of British support. Who is the modern day British analog? We are. Absolutely."
Yeah, and why was Britain so interested in that part of the world? I think people can focus on the religious aspects of it too, but it's also probably the reason why Egypt had been such a benefactor of imperial, even down to current days of as far as foreign aid we give a lot to Egypt, because that Suez Canal and global trade.
Yeah, I mean, why did we also? It's it was so important that we literally constructed it. So the surrounding countries have a lot of importance. Minnesota socialism. The emerald ash borer has destroyed so many ash trees and ludding several in my yard. Fast growing trees will definitely be who I use to replace them. Thanks for the offer and supporting MR, left is best. Well, there you go. Moth. What's so disgusting about this media coverage of the encampments is the focus on the violence. There's never any coverage of the encampments themselves. What's the goal of the encampments is they're actually entirely peaceful and organized setups. Instead, there's violence and trauma porn being broadcast for the sake of it, and there's never coverage of students who are being traumatized by police and
not for the
violence.
sake of it. That I don't mean to correct you, but it's not for the sake of it. It's for the sake of suppressing with violence and force, which is the same reason in any sort of thing like this you focus on the sort of aesthetic. Like I mean that's why it's for a reason.
What coverage we do see of the protesters and the students, it's usually along the lines of, oh, but what do they want? It's so muddled. We don't, even though they've put out bullet points of exactly what their demands are, who's to know what these encampments, these students want? We just, we'll never know.
Right. All right. So Brandon's here. Should we let him in for a sec and then kick him out? Okay. Hey, Brandon.
Hey, sorry about that.
Okay, wait. So 3, 2, 1, or no, 1, 2.
That's not how that works.
Yeah.
To be fair, the first time I also was confused by how it worked, and so that's why it seemed like an extra lag. No, I think
okay.
No, there's absolutely no excuse for that for me, because we do this here all the time. Can you finish 1, 2, 3?
Okay, wait. Finish 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Should I keep counting forever?
Yes.
Emma's sitting there going, all right, let me test this out, guys. 3, 2, 1, no lag. Everything's good. Here we go.
Right. Oh, perfect.
I was like waiting for something to happen.
My brain's working. Let's do this.
Swarm.
Oh, God
no,
damn it.
Just at the risk of repeating myself, I did want to promote a really wonderful interview I did with professor at UVA, Levi Vonk, about his new book.